You won't believe what happened when my neighbor's son demanded to ride my Harley, and his mom called the cops on me while I was on a call with the state attorney. Stick around because this story gets crazier by the minute. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and I was prepping for a crucial video call with the state attorney. My Harley Davidson, freshly polished, was parked in my driveway. A sight that always made me proud. The chrome gleamed in the sunlight, and the deep black paint looked almost like a mirror. I'd spent hours the night before making sure every inch was spotless, and I was looking forward to a productive day. The neighborhood was quiet, with only the distant sound of birds and the occasional bark of a dog. I was just about to head inside to set up my laptop when suddenly, the peace shattered. "You can't park that here," screeched a voice I knew all too well. My heart sank a little. It was Karen, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, storming across the street with her teenage son in tow. Karen was infamous in our neighborhood for her strict, often imaginary interpretation of HOA rules. She had a reputation for nitpicking everything from the color of people's mailboxes to the length of their grass. But today she seemed more fired up than usual. Trailing behind her was her son Jake, a lanky teenager with a mop of messy hair and a look of pure excitement on his face. As they got closer, I could see Jake's eyes locked onto my Harley like it was a prize at a carnival. He didn't even glance at me. Instead, he walked right up to the bike, his hands twitching as if he was barely restraining himself from reaching out and touching it. Before I could even greet them or ask what was going on, Jake blurted out, "Can I ride your Harley?" His voice was loud and eager, echoing down the quiet street. I was stunned. I barely knew the kid. He'd only ever waved at me a couple of times when I was out mowing the lawn. He was maybe 16, and I was pretty sure he didn't even have a driver's license yet, let alone the experience to handle a 700-pound motorcycle. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my tone friendly but firm. "Sorry, Jake, but that's not a good idea. This bike is really heavy and powerful. It's not safe for someone who's never ridden before. Plus, I have an important call coming up, so I can't supervise right now." I expected a little disappointment, maybe a shrug or a muttered, "Okay." But instead, Karen's face twisted into a scowl. She stepped forward, planting herself between me and the bike, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "My son deserves to ride your bike," she snapped. "He's been talking about it for weeks. You're being a terrible neighbor by refusing him. What's the point of having something like this if you're not going to share it with the community?" I was taken aback by her tone. I tried to explain, "Karen, it's not about sharing. It's about safety. This isn't a toy, and I can't just let anyone ride it, especially someone who's never ridden before." But Karen wasn't listening. She started ranting about HOA rules, claiming that motorcycles weren't allowed to be parked in driveways, and that I was breaking the rules by having it out in the open. I knew for a fact that wasn't true. I checked the bylaws before I even bought the Harley. But Karen was relentless, her voice getting louder and more shrill with every word. As I tried to walk away and head inside to prepare for my call, Jake suddenly reached out and placed his hand on the bike's shiny chrome. I watched in disbelief as he ran his fingers along the gas tank, leaving a greasy handprint behind. That was the last straw for me. I turned back to them, my patience wearing thin. "Please don't touch the bike, Jake," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "And Karen, I really need to get ready for my call. Can we talk about this later?" But Karen was having none of it. She whipped out her phone and started dialing, her eyes never leaving mine. "If you won't let my son ride your bike, I'm calling the cops," she threatened, her voice trembling with anger. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All I wanted was a quiet morning and a successful call with the state attorney. Instead, I was facing down the neighborhood's most notorious busybody and her entitled son, all because I wouldn't hand over the keys to my Harley. As Karen started explaining her emergency to the 911 operator, I realized this was only the beginning of what would become one of the most unbelievable mornings of my life. Karen's face turned red, her eyes narrowing as she glared at me. "My son deserves to ride your bike. He's been talking about it for weeks. You're being a terrible neighbor," she snapped, her voice echoing down the street. I could see Jake standing behind her, arms crossed, looking both embarrassed and expectant, as if he truly believed his mother could bully me into handing over the keys to my Harley. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. The last thing I wanted was to escalate the situation. especially with my important call with the state attorney coming up. Karen, I understand Jake is interested in motorcycles, but this Harley is my pride and joy. It's not a toy, and it's definitely not safe for someone who's never ridden before. I'm sorry, but I can't let him ride it. But Karen was relentless. She wasn't interested in reason or safety. She jabbed her finger in the air, her voice rising. You think you're better than everyone else just because you have a fancy motorcycle. This is a family neighborhood. You should be sharing with the community, not hoarding things for yourself. She started ranting about the HOA rules, claiming motorcycles weren't allowed in driveways, and that I was breaking the rules by having it parked there. I knew for a fact that wasn't true. I'd read the HOA bylaws cover to cover before I even bought the Harley. There was nothing in there about motorcycles, and I'd even double-checked with the HOA president when I moved in. Still, Karen kept going, her words tumbling out faster and louder. I'm going to report you to the HOA. You're setting a bad example for the kids in this neighborhood. If you don't want to be a part of this community, maybe you should move somewhere else. She was practically shouting now, drawing the attention of a few neighbors who peeked out their windows to see what the commotion was about. I tried to walk away, hoping she'd get the hint and leave me alone. I needed to get inside and prepare for my call, and I didn't have time for her theatrics. But as I turned to go, I saw Jake out of the corner of my eye. He reached out and actually touched the bike, running his hand along the chrome gas tank. I watched in disbelief as he left a greasy handprint on the polished surface, smudging the shine I'd worked so hard to achieve. That was the last straw. I turned back to them, my patience gone. Jake, please don't touch the bike. Karen, I need you both to leave my property right now. I have an important call coming up, and I don't have time for this. Karen's face twisted in anger. She was fuming, her hands shaking as she whipped out her phone and started dialing. If you won't let my son ride your bike, I'm calling the cops, she threatened, her voice trembling with rage. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Was she really going to call the police because I wouldn't let her teenage son ride my motorcycle? I stood there stunned as she spoke loudly into the phone, making sure I could hear every word. Yes, hello, I need to report a neighbor who's causing a disturbance and refusing to follow HOA rules. He's got a dangerous motorcycle parked in his driveway, and he's being aggressive toward my son. She shot me a triumphant look, as if she just won some kind of battle. I tried to reason with her one last time. Karen, please. This is ridiculous. I haven't done anything wrong. The bike is parked legally, and I have every right to say no. But she ignored me, continuing her exaggerated story to the dispatcher. Jake, meanwhile, looked a little less sure of himself now, glancing nervously between his mother and me. I could see the neighbors across the street watching from behind their curtains, probably wondering what kind of drama was unfolding this time. As Karen finished her call, she put her phone away and crossed her arms, glaring at me with a smug expression. You'll be sorry, she said. The police will make you follow the rules. Maybe next time you'll think twice before being so selfish. I shook my head in disbelief, realizing that this situation had spiraled completely out of control. All I wanted was a quiet morning and a successful call with the state attorney. Instead, I was now waiting for the police to arrive, all because I refused to let a teenager ride my Harley. I couldn't help but wonder what the officers would think when they heard Karen's story, and what my neighbors would say about the latest episode of HOA drama on our street. Just as I was logging into my video call with the state attorney, the unmistakable flash of blue and red lights lit up my living room. My heart sank. I glanced out the window and saw two police cruisers parked at the curb, their lights spinning silently. Two officers stepped out, straightening their uniforms as they made their way up my driveway. Right behind them, Karen and Jake followed, both wearing smug expressions as if they'd already won some kind of victory. I quickly unmuted myself on the video call and apologized to the state attorney, explaining that there was a situation unfolding outside my house. He looked surprised but told me to take my time, so I left my laptop open and hurried to the front door. As I stepped outside, the officers greeted me politely, introducing themselves and asking if I was the homeowner. Before I could answer, Karen jumped in, her voice dripping with drama. Officers, thank goodness you're here. This man is endangering our neighborhood. He's got a dangerous motorcycle parked in his driveway, and he refuses to share it with the community. He's being aggressive and making everyone feel unsafe. She gestured wildly at my Harley, as if it were some kind of wild animal ready to attack. Jake stood beside her, arms crossed, trying to look tough but clearly enjoying the spectacle. I could see a few neighbors peeking through their blinds, no doubt eager to see how this latest episode of HOA drama would play out. The officers turned to me, their faces neutral. "Sir, can you tell us your side of the story?" one of them asked. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Officers, my name is Mark, and yes, I own this house and the motorcycle." I was just about to start an important video call when Karen and her son came over. Jake asked if he could ride my Harley, and I politely said no. It's a powerful bike, and he's not experienced. Karen got upset and started claiming I was breaking HOA rules by parking it in my driveway, which isn't true. She then threatened to call the police if I didn't let her son ride it. The officers nodded, listening carefully. One of them turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have any proof that this motorcycle is violating HOA rules, or that your son has a right to ride it?" Karen's confidence faltered for a moment. She stammered, "Well, everyone knows motorcycles aren't allowed in driveways. It's in the rules. And he's just being selfish. This is a community and he should share." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Do you have a copy of the HOA rules with you? Or any documentation that says motorcycles can't be parked here?" Karen hesitated, glancing at Jake, who suddenly looked less sure of himself. "No, but I know it's in there. I've seen it before," she insisted, though her voice was less certain now. The officers exchanged a look, then turned back to me. "Sir, do you have your registration for the motorcycle?" "Of course," I replied, heading inside to grab the paperwork. I returned a moment later with my registration and insurance, handing them over. The officers checked everything, then walked over to the Harley to make sure it was parked legally. After a quick inspection, they nodded in satisfaction. "Everything seems to be in order here," one officer said. "Your motorcycle is registered, insured, and parked legally on your property. As for the HOA rules, unless someone can provide documentation that says otherwise, we have no reason to believe you're in violation." Karen's face turned red with frustration. "But he's being unreasonable. My son just wants to ride the bike. Why can't he share?" The officer's tone was calm but firm. "Ma'am, this is private property. The owner has every right to decide who uses his motorcycle. It's not a community vehicle, and there's no law requiring him to let anyone else ride it. If you have an issue with the HOA, you'll need to take it up with them directly, not the police." Jake looked down at his shoes, clearly embarrassed now that things hadn't gone their way. Karen, however, wasn't ready to give up. "Well, I'll be talking to the HOA about this," she huffed, grabbing Jake by the arm and storming off down the driveway. The officers turned back to me, their expressions softening. "Sorry for the trouble, sir. You're not in any violation here. Have a good day." I thanked them, relief washing over me as they left. I went back inside, rejoined my video call, and explained what had happened. The state attorney actually laughed, shaking his head at the absurdity of it all. As I settled back into my chair, I couldn't help but feel grateful that the officers had handled the situation professionally, and that, at least for now, the drama was over. The officers took my registration and insurance card, examining them with the kind of thoroughness that comes from years of dealing with neighborhood disputes. One of them even walked around my Harley, checking the license plate and making sure it was parked within the lines of my driveway. After a few minutes, they handed my documents back with a nod. "Everything checks out, sir. This motorcycle is registered to you, and it's parked legally on your property." I could see Karen's face tighten as the officer spoke. She opened her mouth to protest, but the other officer cut her off gently but firmly. "Ma'am, private property rights are very clear. Unless there's a specific law or HOA bylaw being violated, the owner has every right to park his vehicle here and decide who uses it. No one can force him to let someone else ride his motorcycle." Jake, who had been standing with his arms crossed and a hopeful look on his face, suddenly slumped. The realization that he wasn't getting a ride on my Harley hit him hard. He kicked at a pebble on the driveway, his earlier bravado replaced by a sulky silence. I almost felt bad for the kid, but I reminded myself that this was about safety and respect, not about giving in to entitled demands. Karen, however, wasn't ready to back down. She squared her shoulders and tried to regain her composure. But the HOA rules are on my side, she insisted, her voice rising again. I know there's something in there about motorcycles. I've seen it before. He's not supposed to have that thing out here for everyone to see. It's an eyesore and it's dangerous. The officer looked at her patiently. Ma'am, do you have a copy of the HOA rulebook with you? Or any written notice that says motorcycles can't be parked in driveways? Karen hesitated, her confidence wavering. She glanced at Jake as if hoping he might back her up, but he just looked away, clearly wishing he could disappear. Well, no, I don't have it with me right now, she admitted. But I know it's in there. I'll get it and show you. The officer nodded, but his tone was firm. Until you can provide actual evidence, there's nothing we can do. We're here to enforce the law, not neighborhood preferences. If you have a legitimate complaint, you can bring it to the HOA board. But calling the police for something like this is not appropriate. Karen's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. She opened her mouth to argue again, but the officer held up his hand. Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. Making false reports or wasting police resources is a serious matter. If you continue to call us for issues that aren't criminal or don't involve a real emergency, you could be cited for misuse of emergency services. We're here to keep people safe, not to settle personal disputes. For a moment, Karen was speechless. She looked at Jake, then at the officers, and finally at me. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but she seemed to realize she was out of options. With a huff, she turned on her heel and started walking back toward her house, dragging Jake along behind her. He shot me one last, disappointed look before following his mother across the street. I let out a long breath, feeling the tension drain from my shoulders. The officers turned to me, their expressions softening. Sorry for the trouble, sir. You're well within your rights. If you have any more issues, don't hesitate to call us, but hopefully this will be the end of it. I thanked them sincerely, grateful for their professionalism and common sense. As they walked back to their patrol car, I glanced back at my laptop, where the state attorney was still on the call. He had watched the entire scene unfold through my open window, and now he was laughing, shaking his head in disbelief. Well, that was a first, he said, still chuckling. I've seen some wild things in my career, but I don't think I've ever seen someone try to use the police to get a motorcycle ride for their kid. You handled that well. I smiled, feeling a mix of relief and amusement. Thanks. I just hope that's the last time I have to deal with something like this. The state attorney grinned. You never know with neighbors like that. But at least you know your rights, and now so do they. As I settled back into my chair and refocused on my call, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had stood my ground, the officers had backed me up, and Karen had finally been put in her place. Maybe, just maybe, she'd think twice before trying to pull a stunt like that again. After the officers left, Karen stormed off in a huff, dragging a sulking Jake behind her. The two of them cut a dramatic figure as they stomped across the street, Karen muttering under her breath and Jake refusing to meet my eyes. I watched them go, feeling a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. The whole ordeal had been surreal, and I was just grateful it was over. I went back inside, closed the door, and took a deep breath before returning to my video call with the state attorney. He was still on the screen, a bemused smile on his face. Well, that was certainly a first, he said, shaking his head. You handled that better than most people would. Maybe you should get hazard pay for dealing with HOA Karens. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension finally starting to melt away. We finished our call, and I was able to focus on the important matters at hand, but the bizarre encounter with Karen and Jake lingered in my mind. It didn't take long for word to spread around the neighborhood. By that evening, I was getting texts from neighbors asking if I was okay, and wanting to know what had happened. Some of them had seen the police cars and Karen's dramatic exit, and they were eager for the details. I told the story a few times, each retelling making it seem more ridiculous. Soon, people started dropping by, some to laugh about the situation, others to share their own Karen horror stories. One neighbor, Mrs. Thompson, brought over a plate of cookies and told me about the time Karen had tried to report her for having illegal garden gnomes. Another neighbor, Tom, recounted how Karen had once called the HOA because his kid's basketball hoop was too loud. It seemed everyone had a Karen story, and my run-in with her over the Harley quickly became the latest chapter in the neighborhood's ongoing saga. Despite the support from my neighbors, I was still a little uneasy. I knew Karen well enough to know she wouldn't let this go easily. For the next few days, I kept an eye out whenever I was outside, half expecting another confrontation. But Karen kept her distance. She avoided eye contact, and if she saw me coming, she'd quickly turn and walk the other way. Jake, too, seemed to have learned his lesson. He no longer looked at my Harley with longing. Instead, he barely glanced in my direction, clearly embarrassed by the whole ordeal. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, I was surprised to see the HOA president standing on my porch. He looked apologetic, holding a folder in his hands. "Hey Mark," he said. "I just wanted to stop by and apologize for what happened the other day. I heard about the incident with Karen and the police. I want you to know that there are absolutely no rules against parking motorcycles in your driveway. I checked the bylaws myself just to be sure." He handed me a copy of the HOA rules, highlighting the relevant section. "If Karen gives you any more trouble, just let me know. We're here to keep the peace, not to make life difficult for our residents." I thanked him, feeling a wave of relief. It was good to know I had the support of the HOA president and that I was completely within my rights. After that, things slowly returned to normal. Karen kept her distance, but every time she saw my Harley gleaming in the driveway, she'd shoot me a glare that could melt steel. I'd just smile and wave, enjoying the small victory. Jake never asked to ride my Harley again, and I noticed he started spending more time with kids his own age, maybe realizing that not everything in life could be demanded or expected. The whole experience taught me a valuable lesson. Sometimes standing your ground and knowing your rights is the best way to handle difficult people. It's easy to be intimidated by loud voices and empty threats, but the law and common sense are usually on your side. I also learned that I wasn't alone. My neighbors had my back, and together we could handle whatever drama came our way. In the end, my Harley stayed right where it belonged, and I gained a new appreciation for the power of community, and a good story to tell at the next neighborhood barbecue. If you enjoyed this wild HOA Karen story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more unbelievable neighborhood tales, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Got your own crazy neighbor story? Drop it in the comments below. I'd love to hear it.